Before life strikes you with great upheavals, it always whispers in subtle ways. But most men and women are so busy, so caught in the bustle of their own thoughts that they fail to notice. Yet these little signs are always there. The universe does not shout, it hints. It leaves symbols, coincidences, curious feelings that drift across your mind like shadows. And the great tragedy is that most people ignore them until it is far too late. But if you begin to listen, really listen, you will see that life has been speaking to you all along. Now, what do I mean by signs? Not magical omens written in the sky, nor angels scribbling messages in your cornflakes. Rather, the small nudges of reality, the way events seem to cluster, the sudden intuition, or the way a strange chance brings you to precisely the right or the wrong place at precisely the right time. You see, reality is woven together, and you are not separate from it. The waves of your mind and the waves of the universe move in rhythm, and when you are quiet enough, you notice the tune. But if you are distracted, always rushing, then the tune slips past you, like music playing faintly in another room. Have you ever noticed that just before something enormous happens, like falling in love, losing a job, moving cities, there is a peculiar unease, a sense of being lost? It feels as though the ground beneath your feet is giving way, and people panic. They believe something is terribly wrong. But this is the very first whisper of transformation. The seed feels it is dying when, in truth, it is breaking open. You see, the universe sends you this sense of disorientation to remind you that the familiar is ending and the unfamiliar life's great adventure is about to begin. But here lies the difficulty. We modern people, with our obsession for certainty, despise ambiguity. We wish to know exactly what comes next, exactly how it will unfold. Yet the universe never grants you that privilege. Instead, it tosses you into mystery, and it is precisely in that mystery that growth becomes possible. If you resist, you suffer. If you insist on clinging to your maps and your plans, the signs will seem like chaos, like betrayal. But if you let go, if you surrender, you begin to see the patterns, the order behind the disorder. It is as though life itself is training you to dance, not march. Once, there was a man walking along a forest path. He had lost his way, and every tree looked like every other. Panic set in. But then he noticed a small bird. It fluttered ahead, pausing, then flying a little further. Again and again, something within him said, "Follow." And though he had no map, no certainty, he followed the bird. Soon enough, the forest opened, and he stumbled back onto the road he had been seeking. Now, was this coincidence? Perhaps. But in the man's heart, it was more. It was a sign, one he would have missed had he been too proud to listen. You see, signs are never obvious. They are like shy creatures in the woods. If you stomp about with noise and arrogance, they flee. But if you walk softly, if you open your senses, you find them everywhere. A conversation overheard that answers a question you've been brooding on. A chance encounter that introduces you to precisely the right person. A dream that lingers in the morning, whispering some truth you've been unwilling to face. These are not accidents. They are the universe reminding you that you and it are not separate entities. You are woven of the same fabric, dancing to the same hidden rhythm. But why do most people miss these signs? The answer is simple. They do not trust silence. They are addicted to noise, to chatter, to the clamor of their own thoughts. You see, when your mind is always busy, you live in the future or the past. You are not here now. And the signs, my dear friends, do not wait for you in the future. They do not echo from the past. They live only in the present. The bird fluttering before you, the coincidence unfolding, the intuition stirring in your chest, these are fleeting moments. If you are elsewhere, you miss them entirely. It is as though life has placed treasures all along your path. But if you are staring at the horizon, you stumble past them without ever noticing. This is why sages, mystics, and poets have always reminded us, be still, attend to the small, for in the small, the whole is revealed. A smile from a stranger can be a universe speaking. A delay that frustrates you may, in truth, be life's hand steering you from harm. The ego demands grand revelations, trumpets in the sky. But reality is not so crude. The great mysteries hide themselves in the humble, waiting for the eye that sees. Now, many will ask, but Alan, how do I know it's a sign and not simply chance? To this I say, everything is chance, but chance itself is the language of the cosmos. It is as though the universe speaks in riddles, in games of probability, in patterns that appear meaningless until one gazes at them with a different mind. The point is not to catalogue every occurrence as some divine telegram, but to live with awareness. When you are attuned, you no longer demand certainty. You sense, instead, resonance. You feel the harmony between what unfolds without and what stirs within. The Chinese call this the Tao. It is the way. It does not announce itself with fanfare. It flows like water, quietly, irresistibly. And when you align yourself with it, life begins to feel strangely effortless. Doors open, struggles soften, the right people appear. But when you fight it, insisting upon your own rigid path, you stumble and wound yourself at every step. The signs are there to guide you not as commands, but as invitations. An invitation to trust the flow, to stop resisting. But you must learn the art of listening, the discipline of seeing. This is not easy because it demands humility. Humility means accepting that you do not control the symphony of existence. You are but one note among many, and if you try to play louder than the orchestra, you create only noise. But if you learn to play your note in harmony, you find beauty. Now, let us look more deeply at the way signs appear. Sometimes they come as synchronicities, two events, unrelated, occurring together in such a way that they pierce you with meaning. A thought in your mind, and then the radio speaks the same phrase. A dream one night, and the next day reality enacts it before your eyes. Coincidence? Of course. But also something more. Something in you recognizes that you are woven into the pattern. These synchronicities are like cracks in the curtain, glimpses of the machinery behind the stage. And yet, people brush them aside, because to admit them would unravel their comfortable illusion that life is merely random, disconnected, mechanical. But to the open mind, they are confirmations. They say, you are in the right place, or you are being nudged toward a different path. Signs may also arrive in your body in sudden exhaustion, in peculiar bursts of energy, in illness or restlessness. The body is part of the universe, too. When it speaks, pay attention. Most people ignore the body until it collapses. But sickness, weariness, even boredom, these are often signs you have wandered away from your true path. The universe does not always tap you politely on the shoulder. Sometimes it strikes you with a hammer. And still, most prefer to medicate the symptoms rather than ask, what is this trying to tell me? Imagine if you treated the signs in your life as you treat road signs. You would not curse at the sign that says bridge out ahead. You would not cover your eyes and drive faster. Yet in life, when the signs appear, when things fall apart, when relationships break, we refuse to see. We imagine that something is punishing us, when in truth life is redirecting us. Do you not see? The closed door is as much a sign as the open one. The friendship that ends, the job that slips away, the plan that crumbles, all these are messages. They say, not here, not this. But if you insist, you suffer. If you resist, you ache. This is why the wise learn to bow before both gain and loss. They read both as part of the same script. The signs, whether pleasant or painful, are always pointing somewhere. The art is not to demand which way, but to walk it with eyes open. Now, how does one cultivate such openness? Through a practice of trust. Trust does not mean blind belief. It means stepping into life without the need to grip everything so tightly. It means listening more than speaking, watching more than asserting. To trust is to accept that you are part of a whole far greater than your limited mind can fathom. And when you trust, signs begin to reveal themselves, not because they were not there before, but because your eyes have grown sensitive to them. You find yourself saying, "Ah, yes, that's curious. That's just what I needed to see." And slowly, life begins to feel less like a battle and more like a dance. Consider the wind. You cannot see it directly, yet you trust its presence because you feel it on your skin, you watch it move the branches, you hear it whistle through the reeds. Signs from the universe are much the same. You cannot measure them with the instruments of science alone, but you know them in your bones. You sense them in the quiet recognition, the goosebumps on your arms, the stillness in your breath. These are subtle perceptions, easily dismissed by the rational mind. But the rational mind is a blunt tool, forever seeking certainty, where only intuition will do. Many fear intuition, for it cannot be proven on command. Yet it has guided sailors across oceans, artists to their masterpieces, lovers into each other's arms. Intuition is the whisper of the whole, the voice of life itself. When you ignore it, you wander in circles. When you trust it, you discover paths you never imagined. But intuition speaks softly. It competes with the roar of fear, desire, and ambition. And so, the universe must send signs again and again, hoping you will pause long enough to notice. The tragedy is not that signs are rare, it is that our attention is elsewhere. The great irony is this: the universe is never silent. It is speaking constantly, through every sound, every sight, every chance encounter. The silence you experience is not its absence, but your own deafness. And when you awaken, when you quiet the mind and listen with the whole of your being, you realize that everything is communication. The shape of clouds, the fall of dice, the words of a child, these are all the voice of life, if only you have ears to hear. But let me warn you, to live this way is not easy. It demands a letting go of control, of certainty, of the illusion that you are separate from the world. For if the universe is speaking to you, then you are not outside of it. You are part of the sentence, part of the message. And this, I think, is what frightens many people. They prefer to see themselves as isolated individuals, masters of their own fate. But the signs whisper otherwise. You are woven into a fabric so vast that your thoughts, your feelings, your very breath ripple through it endlessly. To acknowledge the signs is to acknowledge your place in that web. And once you see it, you cannot go back to pretending that life is merely random, that you are alone. This is why the ancient traditions place such emphasis on omens, on dreams, on patterns in nature. They were not superstitious fools, as the modern mind often dismisses them. They were attentive. They knew that the world is alive, animated, intelligent. And to live well is not to conquer it, but to converse with it. You and the universe are partners in a dialogue that never ends. When you stop listening, the conversation becomes harsh. But when you listen, truly listen, life becomes like a dance, unexpected, yes, but full of rhythm, full of grace. So, how do we begin again to listen? The answer is so simple that most overlook it. Be still. Take time each day to withdraw from the rush of doing and simply attend. Attend to your breath. Attend to the hum of the world. Attend to the stirrings in your own heart. Signs cannot be caught by force. They are not prey to be hunted. They are gifts, revealed when you are quiet enough to receive them. And when they appear, resist the urge to demand explanations. It is not the task of the sign to tell you the whole story, only to point the way. Imagine standing at a crossroads. The sign does not describe every detail of the road ahead. It does not promise you safety, wealth, or fame. It simply says, this way, and you must choose whether to follow. That is all. This is why faith is required, though not the faith of blind belief. Rather, faith as trust in the unfolding, trust that the road, however uncertain, will lead you precisely where you need to be. And here lies the secret most never grasp. The universe's signs are not designed to satisfy your curiosity. They are designed to move you, to shift your being, to align you with your deeper self. And when you live this way, when you heed the subtle nudges, something remarkable begins to happen. Life itself becomes lighter. You no longer feel you must push so hard, strive so desperately, cling so tightly. You begin to notice how often things fall into place when you allow them, and how often they fall apart when you resist. Even your suffering becomes different. Instead of resenting it, you begin to ask, what is this teaching me? What is life trying to show me through this pain? And strangely enough, the moment you ask, the pain softens, because now it has a purpose. My friends, the universe is not cruel. It does not conspire against you. It conspires with you. But like any dance partner, it requires your cooperation. If you step rigidly, refusing to adjust, the dance is clumsy. But if you yield, if you listen for the rhythm, you move together as one. The signs are the rhythm. They are the cues, the gestures, the movements that invite you into harmony. To ignore them is to stumble. To attend to them is to glide. And in this, you discover that the meaning of life is not hidden in distant tomorrows, but revealed in every moment. If only you watch closely enough, so perhaps the next time you feel lost, confused, uncertain, pause. Instead of rushing to fix everything, look around. Notice the little things. Notice the coincidences, the words that strike you, the silences that weigh on you, the doors that close. Ask yourself not, why is this happening to me? But, what is this trying to show me? In that question lies transformation. In that awareness lies freedom. And soon, you may come to realize that the universe has been speaking all along, not in thunder, not in fire, but in whispers. Whispers that, once heard, can change the course of your life forever.
Have you ever noticed that the harder you try to calm your mind, the more it resembles a pond disturbed by 1,000 pebbles? The very attempt to find peace becomes another stone thrown into the water. What a delicious paradox we've created for ourselves. You know, it's rather fascinating how we've come to treat anxiety in our society. We regard it as something to be eliminated, suppressed, medicated away as if it were some kind of disease or imperfection in the human machinery. But what if we've been looking at it all wrong? Consider this. Anxiety is not some alien force that has invaded you. It is you, a part of you, speaking in a language that perhaps you haven't learned to interpret properly. The butterflies in your stomach, the racing thoughts, the tightness in your chest, these sensations are not your enemy. They are messengers carrying information. Like pain tells you not to touch a hot stove. But here's where it gets interesting. The anxiety itself isn't the problem. The problem is our relationship to it. We've been conditioned to believe that these uncomfortable sensations shouldn't be there, that they represent some failure on our part. And so we fight, we resist, we push away. And in that very resistance, we amplify the very thing we're trying to escape. What would happen if just for a moment you stopped running? If you turned around and faced this messenger, not with fear, but with curiosity? Ah, there you are again. What are you trying to tell me this time? You see, anxiety often arises when we're disconnected from ourselves, from the present moment, from the fundamental nature of reality. It's a signal that we're caught in a story about what might happen rather than what is happening. And in this way, anxiety can be our greatest teacher if only we would listen rather than flee. The first step toward inner calm isn't to banish anxiety, it's to welcome it, as you might welcome a difficult friend who, despite their challenging nature, has something important to share with you. Isn't it curious how much of our anxiety stems from this desperate attempt to control everything? We plan, we worry, we scheme, we organize all in a valiant effort to make life behave according to our specifications. And yet, life keeps doing what life does, doesn't it? You see, we're caught in a magnificent paradox. The things we most want to control are precisely the things that cannot be controlled. We want to ensure our loved ones are always safe, that our future is secure, that we are seen in exactly the way we wish to be seen. But these things are like trying to hold water in your bare hands. The tighter you grip, the more it slips away. And here's the delightful absurdity of it all. The very systems in our brain that evolved to keep us safe, to help us control our environment, now torment us in a world where our physical survival is largely assured, but where uncertainty remains the only certainty. Have you ever watched a cat chasing its tail? Round and round it goes, completely serious in its pursuit, never quite grasping that the thing it's chasing is attached to itself. We are not so different, you and I. We chase certainty, control, resolution, never quite realizing that the chase itself is creating the very anxiety we're trying to escape. What if, instead of trying to control the river, we learned to sail? What if, instead of battling uncertainty, we cultivated a relationship with it? Not as something to be overcome, but as the very texture of being alive. There's a freedom that comes when you realize that anxiety often flourishes in the gap between the world as it is and the world as you think it should be. And perhaps the path to inner calm isn't about closing that gap through control, but about embracing the world and yourself exactly as it is. This doesn't mean giving up or becoming passive. Far from it. It means engaging with life from a place of acceptance rather than resistance. And ironically, when we stop trying to control everything, we often find we have much more influence than we imagine. Now, here's something rather peculiar to consider. Where exactly is the boundary between your mind and the rest of the world? We tend to think of our minds as being safely tucked away inside our skulls, peering out at a separate reality. But is that really the case? You see, what we call anxiety is often described as something happening in here, in our mind-sin response to something out there in the world. But when you look closely, this distinction starts to blur in the most fascinating ways. Consider this. You feel anxious about losing your job. Is that anxiety in you, or is it in the relationship between you and your workplace? You worry about what others think of you. Is that anxiety inside your head, or does it exist in the space between you and others? The conventional wisdom tells us that the problem is in our thinking, that we need to change our thoughts to feel better. But what if the whole setup is a kind of illusion? What if your mind isn't a separate thing that can be fixed in isolation? The Chinese philosopher Chuang Tzu once asked, "Am I a man dreaming I'm a butterfly, or a butterfly dreaming I'm a man?" It's a playful question, but it points to something profound. The boundaries we take for granted may not be as solid as they appear. Your mind is not just in your head, it's in your body, in your environment, in your relationships, in the air you breathe and the food you eat. The anxiety you feel isn't just yours, it's also a product of the culture you live in, the economy you participate in, the planet you inhabit. And so perhaps the first step toward finding calm isn't to retreat further into the mind to fix it, but to recognize that the mind extends beyond what we typically consider its boundaries. When you begin to sense this interconnectedness, this web of mutual influence, something rather extraordinary happens. The tight knot of anxiety begins to loosen, not because you've conquered it, but because you've expanded the context in which it exists. The mind that feels separate and besieged is the anxious mind. The mind that recognizes its fundamental connectedness with all things is the mind that begins to find peace. You know, there's something quite peculiar about the way we experience ourselves in this world. From the moment we're born, we're taught to believe in a story, the story of me as a separate self, a little island of consciousness in a vast sea of otherness. And this belief in separateness is perhaps the greatest source of our anxiety. Think about it. When you're anxious, what are you really anxious about? Isn't it always, in some form or another, about the fate of this separate self? Will I succeed or fail? Will I be loved or rejected? Will I live or die? All of these concerns presuppose this fundamental idea that you are a thing separate from other things, navigating your way through a world that is not you. But what if this entire setup is a kind of magnificent illusion? What if, as the mystics and sages have been telling us for centuries, this sense of being a separate self is more like a useful fiction than an ultimate reality? Let me offer you a different perspective. You are not in the world. You are an expression of the world. Just as a wave is not in the ocean, but is what the ocean is doing at that particular point, you are what the whole universe is doing at the place called here and now. When you begin to sense this not as a philosophical idea, but as a lived experience, something remarkable happens to anxiety. It doesn't disappear entirely, but it begins to lose its grip. Because if you're not separate from everything else, then there's nothing ultimately to protect, nothing ultimately to fear losing. This doesn't mean you become indifferent to the experiences of this particular body and mind. Not at all. It means you hold those experiences in a wider context tone that isn't built on the shaky foundation of separateness. The great joke is that what we're all desperately searching for, this sense of connection, of belonging, of being at home in the universe, isn't something we need to achieve. It's what we are when we stop believing that we are something else. And in that recognition, there's a calm that doesn't come and go with circumstances, a calm that's inseparable from the ground of being itself. Have you ever watched a stream flowing around rocks? It doesn't fight the obstacles in its path. It simply flows around them with an effortless grace. Water doesn't struggle against gravity, it surrenders to it completely. And in that surrender it finds its power, its path, its peace. We humans, though, we're quite different, aren't we? We spend enormous amounts of energy fighting against the flow of life. Something happens that we don't like, and immediately we're in resistance mode. This shouldn't be happening. I don't want this. I can't accept this. And in that resistance, anxiety is born. It's as if we're swimming upstream, exhausting ourselves against the current of reality. And then we wonder why we feel so tired, so stressed, so anxious all the time. Now, I'm not suggesting that you should become a doormat, passively accepting whatever comes your way. That's a misunderstanding. I'm talking about something much more subtle and powerful. What would happen if, when anxiety arises, you stopped fighting it? If instead of tensing against it, trying to push it away, analyzing it, or drowning it out with distractions, you simply allowed it to be there? Not because you like it or want it, but because it's already there. This is what the Taoists call Wu Wei, non-doing or non-forcing. It's the art of allowing things to be as they are, while still participating fully in life. It's swimming with the river, rather than against it. You see, the curious paradox is that when we accept ourselves as we are, including our anxiety, our fear, our discomfort, we create the conditions for natural change to occur. It's only when we stop trying to force ourselves to be calm that genuine calm has any chance of emerging. Think of it like trying to fall asleep. The harder you try to force yourself to sleep, the more awake you become. It's only when you surrender to wakefulness that sleep can find you. Inner calm works the same way. It isn't achieved through effort. It's what remains when effort ceases. It's not something you do. It's what you are when you stop doing. Now, here's something rather fascinating to consider. Where exactly is your attention right now? Is it on these words? On a sensation in your body? On a worry about something that happened earlier today? On a plan for tomorrow? Most of us go through life with our attention scattered in 1,000 directions, pulled by memories, fantasies, plans. Worries rarely fully present with what's actually happening. And in this scattered state, anxiety thrives. But there's a peculiar relationship between where we place our attention and how we feel. When attention is fully in the present moment, not grasping at the past or reaching for the future, anxiety has nowhere to take root. It's like trying to plant a seed in empty space. This is the great secret that meditators and contemplatives have known for centuries. Presence is inherently peaceful. Not because the present moment is always pleasant, it certainly isn't, but because presence itself has a quality of openness, of allowing, of non-resistance. Yet here's the paradox. The moment you try to force yourself to be present, to concentrate, to focus, you create a subtle form of inner conflict. You're using effort to chase something that is only available in the absence of effort. So what's the way through this paradox? It's what I like to call the dance between attention and surrender. You gently bring your attention to the present moment, to your breath, to sensations in your body, to the sounds around you, and then you let go. You don't grasp at the experience. You don't try to hold on to it or improve it. You simply notice what's here and allow it to be as it is. It's like holding a butterfly. Grip too tightly and you crush it. Don't extend your hand at all and it never lands. But if you hold your palm open, attentive yet non-grasping, you create the conditions for a moment of connection. In this dance between attention and surrender, you discover something remarkable. That calm isn't something you achieve through effort, but something you fall into when you stop trying so hard. It's always available, like the blue sky behind the clouds, if only we would stop stirring up the mental weather. Isn't it curious how our very pursuit of peace often becomes the thing that disturbs our peace? We read books about finding calm, download meditation apps, attend retreats, practice breathing techniques, all with this underlying sense that we need to get somewhere other than where we are. And in this constant reaching, this perpetual seeking for some future state of calm, we overlook something rather obvious. The seeking itself is a form of agitation. Think about it. When you're anxiously pursuing calm, you're implicitly telling yourself, I'm not okay as I am right now. I need to be different. This experience needs to be different. And that very attitude creates a subtle but persistent background of dissatisfaction, of unease, of anxiety. It's like trying to smooth out ripples in water by slapping at them with your hand. The very attempt creates more of the disturbance you're trying to eliminate. I'm reminded of a Zen story. A student asks the master, how do I enter the path to peace? The master replies, do you hear the stream? The student listens and says, yes. The master says, enter there. What's the point of this little exchange? The master is pointing out that peace isn't something to be attained through striving. It's already here in the simple sounds of the stream, in the feeling of your breath, in the sensations of your body sitting or standing where you are. The great cosmic joke is that what we're looking for is not elsewhere. It's not in some future achievement or state. It's in the very fabric of our present experience, if only we would stop overlooking it in our desperate search for something better. This doesn't mean we shouldn't take practical steps to address genuine problems in our lives. Of course we should. But there's a world of difference between responding skillfully to life's challenges and being caught in a neurotic pursuit of some imagined future state of perfect calm. The former comes from a place of fundamental okayness with what is. The latter comes from a place of resistance to what is. And that resistance, that gap between what is and what we think should be, is where anxiety makes its home. Have you ever noticed the space between your thoughts? It's easy to miss because we're so captivated by the content of thinking, the endless internal commentary, the planning, remembering, worrying, fantasizing. But if you pay very close attention, you might notice little gaps, little spaces of silence between one thought and the next. Most of us identify completely with the stream of thinking. We believe we are our thoughts. I think, therefore I am, as Descartes famously put it. But what if that's not quite accurate? What if the real you isn't the thinking, but the awareness in which thinking happens? Consider this. Thoughts come and go like clouds in the sky, but the sky itself, the open, clear space of awareness, remains unchanged. Clouds don't stain the sky. They appear in it, move across it, and dissolve back into it, but the sky itself is untouched. In the same way, anxiety, fear, worry, these are like weather patterns moving through the open space of your consciousness. They appear, they move, they dissolve. But the consciousness itself, that which is aware of the anxiety, remains untouched. Now, this isn't just a clever metaphor. It's pointing to something you can verify directly in your own experience. Right now, as you're listening to these words, notice that there's an awareness of the sounds, of sensations in your body, of any emotions that might be present. That awareness itself, can you find any anxiety in it? Or is anxiety something that appears within this open space of awareness? When we begin to recognize ourselves as this open, spacious awareness, rather than as the particular contents that appear within it, something remarkable happens. We discover a dimension of our being that is inherently peaceful, inherently free, inherently holy, not because it has achieved some ideal state, but because it was never broken to begin with. This isn't some esoteric state accessible only to monks in caves. It's what you are right now beneath the story of being a separate self who needs to get somewhere other than here. The space between thoughts isn't empty in the sense of being nothing. It's empty in the sense of being full of potential, full of life, full of a peace that doesn't depend on circumstances being a particular way. Have you ever really watched a leaf in autumn? I mean really watched as it changes color, gradually loosens its grip on the branch, and finally lets go, completely floating, dancing, swirling its way to the ground. There's a profound wisdom in this natural process that our anxious minds have forgotten. The leaf doesn't resist its fate. It doesn't cling desperately to the branch, fighting against the changing seasons. It doesn't worry about what will happen when it falls, or compare itself to other leaves that haven't yet begun to change. No, the leaf simply participates in the rhythm of nature, growing when it's time to grow, letting go when it's time to let go. And in that surrender to the natural order of things, there's a kind of grace, a kind of peace that our anxiety-ridden human minds rarely know. You see, so much of our anxiety stems from our resistance to the fundamental nature of existence, that everything changes, that nothing lasts forever, that we are not separate from or in control of the vast process of life. We cling to youth, to health, to relationships, to possessions, to identities, all the while knowing somewhere deep down that everything we grasp at will eventually slip through our fingers. And it's this desperate clinging, this resistance to the natural flow of impermanence, that creates so much of our suffering. What would happen if we learned from the leaf? If we recognize that we too are part of this dance of emergence and dissolution, this endless cycle of form arising from formlessness and returning to it again. I'm not suggesting that you should become indifferent to life or passive in the face of things that can be changed, not at all. But there's a vast difference between engaged participation in life and the kind of white-knuckled control that comes from fear. The leaf doesn't throw itself off the branch prematurely. It doesn't rush the process or try to avoid it. It simply allows autumn to do what autumn does. And in that allowing, there's a wisdom and a peace that our clever, controlling minds would do well to remember. We are not just separate selves battling against an indifferent universe. We are expressions of the universe itself, like waves on the ocean, rising and falling with the greater rhythms of existence. There's a curious disease that afflicts almost all of us in the modern world. I call it the disease of becoming. It's the persistent feeling that we're not quite there yet, not quite complete, not quite good enough, that we need to become something other than what we already are. We are constantly in this state of psychological time, living for some future moment when everything will finally be okay. When I get that promotion, when I find the right partner, when I finally overcome my anxiety, then I'll be happy, then I'll be at peace. But that future moment never actually arrives, does it? Because when we get what we think we want, we immediately find something else to strive for, something else to become. It's like drinking salt water to quench your thirst. The more you drink, the thirstier you become. And so we find ourselves in this perpetual state of becoming, never fully arriving, never fully being here. And in this gap between what we are and what we think we should be, anxiety flourishes. Now, I'm not suggesting that you should have no goals, no aspirations, no desire for change or growth. That would be absurd. But there's a profound difference between pursuing goals from a place of wholeness versus pursuing them from a place of lack. When action arises from the sense that something is fundamentally missing or wrong with you as you are right now, it carries with it a quality of strain, of effort, of anxiety. But when action arises from a recognition of your inherent completeness, it has a different quality, altogether a quality of ease, of flow, of natural unfolding. This is what I mean by the freedom of being versus the trap of becoming. Being doesn't mean stagnation. It means full engaged presence with what is, from which authentic action naturally emerges. Think of a great artist at work or an athlete in the zone. There's intense activity, yes, but it's not driven by some neurotic need to become something other than what they are. It's an expression of what they already are, flowing outward into form. This is available to all of us, in every moment. The peace we're seeking isn't waiting for us in some imagined future when we finally become good enough. It's available right now in the simple recognition of what we already are, this boundless, beginningless awareness in which the entire dance of life is happening. In this recognition, anxiety doesn't disappear entirely. It still arises as part of the human experience. But it no longer defines us. It's just another wave on the ocean of awareness, arising and passing away, while we remain as the ocean itself, vast, deep, and fundamentally at peace. You know, after exploring all these dimensions of anxiety and inner calm, we might be tempted to walk away with some neat conclusion, some formula or technique that will finally solve the problem of human suffering. But that would miss the point entirely, wouldn't it? The truth is both simpler and more profound than any conclusion I could offer. This moment, this very experience you're having right now, contains within it everything you've been searching for. Not because it's particularly special or pleasant, but because it's what's real. And reality, when met with open awareness rather than resistance, has its own inherent peace. The great paradox is that what we're most desperately seeking, this sense of wholeness, of belonging, of being at home in the universe, isn't something we need to achieve or become. It's what we already are when we stop believing that we're something else. So perhaps the path to inner calm isn't a path at all. Perhaps it's more like a clearing away, a letting go of all the ideas and strategies that keep us from recognizing what has been here all along, this boundless awareness in which the entire dance of life, including anxiety, is happening. And in that recognition, we don't become something new. We simply remember what we've always been like, the wave remembering it's the ocean, like the leaf remembering it's the tree, like the anxious human remembering they are the universe itself, taking the shape of a person for a brief and precious moment. If these words have resonated somewhere deep within you, perhaps it's not because I've told you something new, but because I've reminded you of something you've always known, a knowing that lives in your bones, in the silence between your thoughts, in the space where you and the universe are not two separate things. Share this perspective if you feel moved to do so. But remember, no one else can awaken to this truth for you. The invitation is always here, in each moment, to recognize the freedom and peace that is your birthright, not as something to attain, but as the very nature of what you already are. The universe has been playing an extraordinary game with itself for billions of years. This game is called death and rebirth. It's happening in every moment, with every breath, with every thought that arises and dissolves. And yet, we've convinced ourselves that we're somehow exempt from this cosmic dance. We believe we should be permanent in a world where nothing else is. What a curious predicament we've created. In the next little while, I'd like to explore with you this most fundamental aspect of existence, seen not as something morbid or frightening, but as the very secret to living fully. For when we truly understand death, we finally understand life. In our Western world, we've created the most extraordinary situation. We've made death into something unspeakable. We don't talk about it at dinner parties. We shield our children from it. We've even created an entire industry dedicated to making corpses look as if they're merely sleeping. Isn't that fascinating? You see, this avoidance isn't accidental. It stems from a fundamental misunderstanding about what we are. We've convinced ourselves that we are permanent entities, separate from the world, desperately trying to maintain our existence against all odds. and from this misunderstanding springs our terror. But what if I told you that this very attempt to avoid thinking about death is precisely what makes it so frightening? It's rather like trying not to think about a pink elephant. The harder you try, the more it dominates your thoughts. Our culture's desperate attempt to ignore death has paradoxically made it into a monster lurking in our subconscious. Consider for a moment the extraordinary paradox we've created. The one experience that every single human being will have without exception has become the experience we refuse to contemplate. We prepare for everything else, education, career, family, retirement, but not for the one certainty in life. How very odd. What if I told you that the fear of death arises primarily from a case of mistaken identity? You see, we have been taught to believe that we are isolated entities, separate from the universe. But this separation is an illusion. As I often say, you and I are as much continuous with the universe as a wave is continuous with the ocean. Have you ever seen a wave that was separate from the ocean? Of course not. The wave is a pattern of behavior that the ocean is doing. Similarly, you are something the whole universe is doing, in the same way that a wave is something that the whole ocean is doing. The fear of death comes from identifying yourself with the wave rather than with the water. If you think, I am this particular pattern that must be preserved at all costs, then naturally you will fear the moment when that pattern dissolves. But if you realize that you are the water, taking on countless forms, rising and falling in an eternal dance, where is the fear? Consider this curious fact. You cannot experience your own absence. Try it. Can you imagine what it's like to not exist? You can't, because there would be no you to have the experience. What we fear is not non-existence, but the idea of Iten, idea that makes no sense, since non-existence cannot be experienced. The cosmic joke is that we've convinced ourselves we're separate from nature, when in fact we are nature. We are the universe experiencing itself. And from this perspective, death is not an end, but a transformation like a wave returning to the ocean. Look at the world around you. Do you see anything permanent? The seasons change, mountains slowly erode, stars are born and die. Everything is in flux. And yet, we somehow expect ourselves to be the exception to this universal pattern. Death is not an aberration in nature, it's essential to the rhythm of life. Without death, there could be no birth. Without autumn and winter, there could be no spring. The fallen leaves decay to nourish new growth. Your own body is completely renewed every 7 years or so. The person you were physically a decade ago has entirely vanished. As I've often pointed out, without birth and death, and without the perpetual transmutation of all forms of life, the world would be static, rhythmless, undancing, mummified. Would you really want to live in such a world? The universe doesn't create and then destroy. Creation and destruction are two aspects of the same process, like the front and back of your hand. You cannot have one without the other. Life and death are not enemies, but partners in an eternal dance. So you see, death is not a mistake to be corrected or an enemy to be defeated. It is as natural and necessary as the night following day. The real question isn't how to avoid death, but how to relate to it in a way that enriches life rather than diminishes it. We are so caught up in the illusion of time, aren't we? Past, present, future, these neat little compartments we've created to make sense of our experience. But have you ever noticed that you never actually experience the past or the future? You only ever experience now. The past exists only as memory, the future only as anticipation, and both of these happen in the present moment. This moment right now, as you're listening to my voice, is all there ever really is. And yet we spend most of our lives mentally absent from it, lost in regrets about yesterday or anxieties about tomorrow. Death appears frightening when we think of it as something that will happen later in a future we imagine. but the future never arrives. When death comes, it will be now the same now in which you've always lived. There is nowhere else for it to happen. Consider this fascinating perspective. Just as space is what separates objects from one another, time is what separates events. But these separations are conventions, useful fictions. In reality, all space and all time are aspects of a unified whole. Death is not an event that waits for you at the end of a long road. It's an aspect of the eternal present, just as birth is. So you see, when we step outside the linear view of time, death is not an ending but a transition within the eternal now. It's like turning a corner on a path. The path continues, just in a direction you couldn't see before. Do you know why children love to play hide and seek? There's something delicious about pretending not to know where someone is and then experiencing the joy of rediscovery. In a way, this game mirrors something profound about existence itself. The universe, you see, is playing an elaborate game of hide and seek with itself. In Sanskrit, they call it Leela, divine play. We are the universe hiding from itself, forgetting its true nature so that it can have the delight of remembering again. Through the development of the egotist sense of being a separate self, we've hidden our fundamental connection to everything. We've drawn boundaries around ourselves and said, this is me and that is not me. And then we've forgotten that we made up these boundaries in the first place. Death is the ultimate revealing in this cosmic game of hide and seek. It's the moment when the pretense falls away, the boundaries dissolve, and what you've always been, the entire cosmos, is revealed once more. Not as an intellectual concept, but as lived reality. There's a profound liberation in no longer having to pretend that you're just this limited, separate entity struggling against the universe. In death, the game is upend. What could be more freeing than that? The fear comes only from forgetting that it's a game we chose to play. Eastern traditions have long understood what we in the West struggle to accept. Impermanence is not a flaw in the system, but its very essence. The Japanese have a concept called mono no aware, the pathos of things which recognizes that the transience of life is precisely what gives it beauty. Think of cherry blossoms. Would they be as cherished if they bloomed all year round? No, it's their brief, exquisite appearance and quick falling that makes them so precious. Their impermanence doesn't diminish their beauty, it constitutes it. Similarly, the Buddhist tradition teaches us not to grasp or cling to passing phenomena. As the Diamond Sutra puts it, we should view all things as a phantom, a dewdrop, a bubble in a stream. Not to devalue them, but to appreciate their true nature. When we resist impermanence, when we try to freeze time or deny death, we create suffering for ourselves. It's like trying to hold on to a handful of water by squeezing it tightly. The tighter we grip, the more quickly it slips away. But when we learn to open our hands, to appreciate without clinging, something remarkable happens. We discover a deeper beauty in life's passing nature. We find ourselves fully present in each moment, neither rushing toward the future nor clinging to the past. And in that presence we taste eternity. Isn't it interesting that the one reality that makes life most precious is the very one we refuse to face? Death is life's greatest deadline, and without deadlines, we procrastinate. Without death, life would lose its poignancy, its urgency, its sweetness. I've often suggested to my students a simple thought experiment. Imagine you had eternal life. What would you do today? Tomorrow? Next year? Would you feel any need to read that book you've been putting off, to reconcile with that friend, to tell someone you love them? Probably not. After all, you could always do it latter infinitely later. Now, imagine you knew with certainty that you had exactly 1 year to live. How would your priorities shift? What would suddenly become important? What would you let go of? This awareness of finitude focuses the mind wonderfully, doesn't it? Death, you see, is not the opposite of life, it is the backdrop against which life becomes visible. Like stars that can only be seen against the darkness of night, the beauty and meaning of our existence shine forth precisely because they are temporary. So the paradox is this. By accepting death as an integral part of life, we don't diminish life, we enhance it. We bring a new quality of awareness to each moment. We stop postponing joy. We cease living as if we had all the time in the world, and instead live as if each day might be our last, because one day we will be right. Many people fear death because they imagine it as a state of nothingness, a void in eternal darkness. But let's examine this fear more closely. What exactly is nothing, and is it really possible to experience it? You see, we have this curious idea that after death we will somehow be trapped in a dark void, aware of our own non-existence. But that's a contradiction, isn't it? To experience nothingness would require someone to have the experience. And if someone is having an experience, it isn't nothingness at all. As I often point out, when you die, you're not going to have to put up with everlasting non-existence, because that's not an experience. You cannot be aware of being unconscious for the same reason you cannot bite your own teeth. What's more, we all come from what others might call nothing. Before you were born, where were you? What was it like to not exist? You can't remember, because there was no you to have the experience. And yet, here you are, emerged from that very nothingness. Perhaps what we call nothing is actually the source of everything, not an empty void, but an infinite potentiality. Not the absence of existence, but existence in its unmanifested form. After all, the universe itself emerged from what physicists might call a quantum vacuum, not empty space, but a plenum of possibility. There's a beautiful concept in many spiritual traditions that death is not an end but a return, a homecoming. And science, in its own way, confirms this profound intuition. Consider the physical matter that makes up your body. Every atom in you was forged in the heart of a star that exploded billions of years ago. As the poet says, we are quite literally stardust. And when we die, those atoms don't disappear, they simply change form, returning to the great cycle of nature. The carbon in your bones may become part of a tree, which bears fruit eaten by a bird, which sings songs that delight a child. The water in your cells will evaporate, join the clouds, fall as rain, flow to the ocean. Nothing is lost. Everything is transformed. And what of consciousness, that mysterious quality that seems to animate matter? Perhaps it too is not created or destroyed, but merely changes form. Like a wave that returns to the ocean, perhaps our individual awareness returns to a universal consciousness from which it temporarily emerged. So you see, death need not be viewed as annihilation, but as reintegration. Not as an exit from existence, but as a return to our source, like a river flowing back to the sea. We came from the universe, we return to the universe, and in truth we never left it at all. We've been home all along. If death is inevitable, and it most certainly is, then perhaps the question isn't how to avoid it, but how to approach it with grace, curiosity, and even a touch of artistic flair. Just as there is an art to living well, there is an art to dying well. The first principle of this art is presence. Death, like birth, is one of life's great transitions, worthy of our full attention. Yet our culture encourages us to be absent from it or numb ourselves with distractions or medications, to pretend it isn't happening. What if, instead, we chose to be fully present with the mystery of our own passing? The second principle is acceptance. Not a grim resignation, but the kind of acceptance that comes from deep understanding. When we truly see that death is not an enemy but a natural completion of life's cycle, resistance melts away. In its place comes a profound peace. The third principle is curiosity. What lies beyond this life? No one can say with certainty. But rather than filling that unknown with fearful projections, we can approach it with the wide-eyed wonder of a child. Death may well be the greatest adventure of our journey into the ultimate unknown. Throughout history, those who have approached death with awareness have often reported not terror but awe, not contraction but expansion, not an end but a threshold. Perhaps they glimpsed what the mystics have always intuited, that what we call death is but a doorway to a greater life. As we come to the end of our exploration together, I invite you to consider this. Everything passes. The good and the bad, pleasure and pain, success and failure, all of it is transient, flowing like a river that never steps in the same place twice. This passing nature of all things is not a tragedy to be lamented, but a truth to be embraced. For in accepting the impermanence of life, we discover a profound freedom. We no longer need to grasp so tightly, to control so desperately, to fear so deeply. We can hold life lightly, appreciatively, joyfully, knowing that its very transience is what makes it precious. Death is not waiting for us at the end of a long road. It is here with us from the beginning, the inseparable twin of life, dancing in perfect harmony. And when we befriend death, when we integrate it into our awareness instead of pushing it away, something remarkable happens. We become more alive. So I leave you with this thought. Don't postpone your living until some future moment when all conditions seem perfect. Don't wait to be fully alive. This moment, with all its beauty and imperfection, its joy and sorrow, its absolute transience, this moment is your life. And it is enough. For what we are seeking is not immortality, but eternity. Not endless time, but the transcendence of time. And that eternity, that timeless now, is available to us in every momentum, only we have eyes to see and hearts to receive it.
This is the moment everything in your life turns around. And the beautiful irony is that you have been waiting for it, longing for it, hoping it would come from the outside. Perhaps from a change of circumstances, a new relationship, a stroke of fortune, or some divine intervention that would rewrite the story of your existence. But the moment is not a distant event. It is not a lottery ticket in time waiting for you to stumble upon it. It is right here in this very breath, in this very awareness, in this very recognition that you have the power to see differently. That shift, so subtle, so ordinary, can become the revolution that changes everything. You see, life does not change because the world outside suddenly rearranges itself in your favor. Life changes the instant you awaken to the fact that you are not a victim of the unfolding play, but its conscious participant. The world has always been moving, shifting, reshaping. Seasons turn, the sun rises and sets, the tides rise and fall, and in all of this you are being carried along whether you resist or relax. But when you realize that you do not have to fight against the river, that you can simply flow with it and allow it to take you where you are meant to go, that is when everything turns around, not because the river changed, but because you stopped exhausting yourself trying to swim upstream. The illusion most people carry is that the moment of change is somewhere in the future. If only I can secure that job, then my life will be different. If only I meet the right partner, then I'll finally feel complete. If only I escape this situation, then happiness will arrive. This thinking keeps the mind locked in a prison of postponement. You never actually arrive because you are always chasing tomorrow. The breakthrough is to see that nothing stands between you and freedom except the thought that you are not already free. Nothing blocks your peace except the idea that peace is elsewhere, and nothing separates you from transformation except the illusion that it is not already within you. So this moment, right now, is not just another tick of the clock. It is the threshold. It is the point where you stop living as though you were late to your own life and instead recognize that you are precisely on time. You are not behind, you are not lost, you are not broken. You are simply becoming, and when you see this, the whole weight of regret and anxiety begins to dissolve, because regret lives in the past and anxiety thrives in the future. But the present, this breath, is untouched. The present is whole, and if you can step fully into it, you find that the healing, the clarity, the joy you sought outside has always been here within. Consider the simple act of breathing. You have been doing it since you were born, and yet how rarely do you notice it? The breath has carried you through every trial, every heartbreak, every triumph. It is the most loyal companion you have, and the moment you give it your attention, everything slows, everything softens. In that instant, you see that peace was never absent. You were simply distracted. And once you see that peace is possible here, in this ordinary moment, you begin to realize that nothing else needs to happen before you can live fully. That is the turn. That is the pivot. That is the reversal of the old story, where you thought life was always somewhere else, sometime else. The great paradox is that transformation is not about acquiring something new, but about letting go of what is unnecessary. You have been carrying heavy burdens, the burden of expectations, the burden of comparison, the burden of perfection. And each of these has been whispering to you, you are not enough yet. You must do more, achieve more, prove more. But at what point does the proving end? At what point do you finally rest in your own being? The shift comes when you see that you don't need to carry any of it. You can simply put it down, and when you put it down, you discover lightness. The same world, the same life, suddenly feels different, not because the weight disappeared from the earth, but because you stopped clinging to it. This is the miracle of perception. The world reflects the state of your mind. When your mind is restless, life appears chaotic. When your mind is fearful, life appears hostile. When your mind is open, life appears abundant. You do not control the waves of existence, but you do control the lens through which you see them. And when you shift the lens, the entire panorama changes. The world you once saw as against you suddenly reveals itself as for you. Every challenge becomes a teacher, every ending becomes a beginning, and every detour becomes a path. Nothing was wasted, nothing was wrong. Everything was guiding you here to this realization, to this moment of awakening. It is rather like watching a play. If you only identify with the tragedy of the scene, you will suffer with the characters. But when you step back and see that the play has many acts, and that the sorrow of one act is essential for the joy of the next, you begin to enjoy the entire performance. You do not resist it, you allow it. In the same way, the heartbreaks, disappointments, and struggles of your life were not interruptions of the story. They were part of the story. They shaped you, refined you, stretched you, and prepared you to awaken to something deeper. And now, the moment arrives when you see it all with new eyes. This is when everything turns around, not because the past is erased, but because it is finally understood. The turning point is not dramatic in the way you might imagine. It is not a thunderclap, not always a grand revelation. Sometimes it is as gentle as a sigh, as subtle as a quiet thought. I no longer need to resist. It is the letting go of the need to control the uncontrollable. It is the surrender to what is, and in that surrender, paradoxically, you find the greatest power. For the more you try to force life to your will, the more it slips away. But the more you allow life to unfold, the more it brings you exactly what you need, even if it looks different from what you wanted. This is the wisdom of the universe. It knows where to take you better than your plans ever could. You thought you lost opportunities, but in truth you were being redirected. You thought people abandoned you, but in truth you were being set free. You thought you failed, but in truth you were being taught how to rise. And when you finally see this, you cannot help but smile at the strange, playful intelligence behind it all. The universe was never against you. It was conspiring with you to awaken you, to bring you here. To this moment, to the realization that everything is already turning in your favor. The problem is that most of us cling to the past. We replay the mistakes, we revisit the wounds, we rehearse the what-ifs. And by doing so, we blind ourselves to the possibility of now. Imagine holding onto a rope that is burning your hands, and instead of letting go, you grip it tighter. That is what regret does. It convinces you that somehow, by holding onto the pain, you are protecting yourself from it. But in truth, you are only prolonging it. The instant you let go, the burning stops, and life, in its infinite generosity, offers you a fresh rope, one that is not a noose but a lifeline. But you must release the old to grasp the new. The same is true of the future. Anxiety is simply the attempt to control what has not yet arrived. It is a movie projected in the mind, and yet we suffer as though it were real. The mind races with scenarios, but notice that the body only ever breathes in the present. The body is here while the mind wanders elsewhere. The transformation begins when the mind and the body finally reunite, when thought and breath, fear and presence come together in the same moment. That union is peace. That union is clarity, and from that clarity you can meet the future not with trembling, but with trust. Trust is the essence of the turn. To trust does not mean to know what is coming next. It means to be at peace with not knowing. To trust is to lean into the mystery with open arms, and life, when met with trust, responds in kind. The doors you thought were closed begin to open. The people you thought were lost reappear in new forms. The opportunities you once chased begin to flow naturally toward you. It is not magic, it is alignment. When you stop resisting life, life stops resisting you. And suddenly everything feels lighter, more fluid, more graceful. That is the turning, that is the miracle you have been waiting for. Now you may ask, but how do I hold on to this moment? How do I keep it from slipping away? The answer is you don't. You cannot hold water in your fist, but you can drink from it. You cannot trap the wind, but you can breathe it. In the same way, you cannot cling to the present, but you can live it. And the more you live it, the more you realize that every moment is this moment. Every instant has the same potential for transformation. There is no single turning point in life. There are countless turning points happening again and again. Each time you return to awareness, each time you choose to see differently, each time you let go and trust. And so you need not wait any longer. This is the moment, this breath, this awareness. Let it be the one where you stop running after life and start inhabiting it. Let it be the one where you stop postponing happiness until conditions are perfect and instead find joy in the imperfection. Let it be the one where you realize that the turnaround is not in the distance, but already here, already happening in the stillness of your being. For life has never abandoned you. It has only been waiting for you to notice. This is the moment everything in your life turns around. Not because the world outside has shifted, but because you have. And when you shift, the world responds. The reflection changes. The scenery transforms. And what once felt like struggle becomes play. What once felt like chaos becomes order. What once felt like the end becomes the beginning. You begin to notice that even the smallest details of life, things you once overlooked, shimmer with new meaning. The laughter of a child, the warmth of sunlight on your face, the way the leaves sway in the breeze, all of it becomes evidence that life is not waiting to begin, but has already begun. What you needed was not more time, but more presence. Not more possessions, but more perception. When the mind quiets, the heart speaks, and it tells you that fulfillment is not something you achieve, but something you allow. It has always been here, quietly humming beneath the noise of thought, patiently waiting for you to listen. In this realization, gratitude arises naturally. Gratitude not for extraordinary miracles, but for the ordinary miracle of existence itself. Gratitude for the fact that you are here, breathing, conscious, aware, capable of love, capable of wonder. Gratitude has the power to transform the mundane into the sacred, because it shifts your attention from what is lacking to what is already abundant. And when you live in gratitude, the universe seems to respond with more reasons to be grateful. What was once taken for granted becomes a source of joy. What was once overlooked becomes luminous. You start to see that nothing in your life was wasted. Every path, even the ones that seemed to lead nowhere, carried you forward. Every mistake was not a detour from your destiny, but a step into your becoming. And the deeper you look, the more you understand that life was never punishing you. It was preparing you. Every fall was teaching you resilience. Every loss was teaching you to let go. Every ending was carving space for a new beginning. When you see this, you no longer curse the past. You bless it, for without it, you would not have reached this moment of clarity. And with that blessing comes forgiveness, not just forgiveness of others, but forgiveness of yourself. You forgive yourself for not knowing sooner, for stumbling, for holding on too tightly, for being afraid. You see that you were doing the best you could with the understanding you had at the time. And when you release the harshness of judgment, what remains is compassion. Compassion for yourself, compassion for others, compassion for the shared struggle of being human. That compassion softens you, and in softening it strengthens you. For true strength is not hardness, but openness. The openness to feel, to connect, to live without armor. With this openness, love flows more freely. Not the conditional love that demands, clings, and fears loss, but the spacious love that simply is. A love that does not say, I will love you if, but simply says, I love. A love that is not limited to one person or one circumstance, but radiates into every corner of your life. This love is not something you must chase. It is something you uncover. It is already within you, obscured only by fear, and when fear dissolves, love is revealed as the natural state of your being. It is then that life becomes play again. Not a grim struggle, not a desperate climb towards some imagined peak, but a dance. You begin to move with the rhythm of things, to see challenges not as threats but as invitations. You laugh more, worry less. You find yourself lighter, freer, more attuned to the unfolding mystery. And in this play, you rediscover your own creativity, the joy of expression, the thrill of curiosity, the delight of wonder. The child you once were is not lost. It is reborn in your awareness. This is why the turnaround is not about becoming someone new, but about remembering who you have always been. Beneath the layers of conditioning, beneath the masks you wore to fit in, beneath the fears and doubts, there has always been a self that is radiant, alive, complete. The journey was never about seeking it elsewhere. It was about peeling away what concealed it. And now, as you glimpse that true self, you realize that the search is over. You are already home. And when you are home within yourself, the outside world no longer holds the same power to shake you. Circumstances may rise and fall, relationships may shift, opportunities may come and go, but your sense of being rooted in the present does not waver. It is like the deep roots of a tree that keep it standing through storms. The winds may howl, the branches may bend, but the essence remains grounded. This grounding is not indifference, it is freedom. Freedom from being tossed endlessly by the waves of life. Freedom from the illusion that peace depends on things going your way. From this freedom, clarity emerges. Decisions that once felt paralyzing suddenly become simpler, because you no longer act from fear or desperation. You act from alignment. You choose not based on what will silence your insecurities for a moment, but on what resonates with the deeper truth of who you are. And when you choose from this place, life begins to align with you. Paths open where there were none, synchronicities appear as if orchestrated, and what once seemed like struggle transforms into effortless unfolding. This is not to say that challenges vanish. Life will still bring you tests because that is the nature of growth. But your relationship to challenge changes. What once felt like an enemy becomes a companion. A challenge is no longer something to be feared, but something to be embraced. A teacher disguised in difficulty. Each challenge reveals a hidden strength within you. Each obstacle expands your capacity, and each setback teaches patience, humility, and trust. What once broke you now builds you, because you no longer measure your worth by your ease, but by your willingness to keep growing. In this way, even suffering takes on a new meaning. You no longer resist it with bitterness, nor cling to it with identity. You experience it, you learn from it, and you let it pass. You understand that suffering is not a punishment but a signal, a guide pointing you toward what needs to be released, healed, or understood. And when you face suffering with this awareness, it loses its power to enslave you. It becomes a doorway rather than a prison, an opening rather than an ending. And as you walk through that doorway again and again, you realize that transformation is not a single event, but a continual unfolding. The turnaround is not something that happens once and is done. It is a living process. Each time you let go of fear, the wheel turns. Each time you choose presence over distraction, the wheel turns. Each time you embrace trust instead of control, the wheel turns. And the more you allow the wheel to turn, the more you see that it was never turning away from you. It was always turning toward you. This shift also changes the way you see others. Where once you judged, you now understand. Where once you envied, you now celebrate. Where once you resented, you now forgive, because you see yourself reflected in everyone. The same struggles, the same longing for peace, the same search for meaning. And in seeing this, compassion deepens. You recognize that everyone is on their own path of becoming, just as you are, and that their pace, their struggles, and their lessons are perfectly suited to them. This recognition dissolves the urge to compete or compare. You walk your path, they walk theirs, and both are sacred. As compassion deepens, so too does connection. You begin to experience a quiet joy in simply being with others, without needing to change them or be changed by them. You listen more, you demand less. You appreciate more, you expect less. And in that simplicity, relationships become lighter, freer, more genuine. You no longer seek people to fill a void in you. You share your fullness with them, and in that sharing, love becomes effortless, because it is no longer based on need but on presence. Life itself starts to feel like a relationship, an intimate, unfolding dance between you and the universe. You give and it gives. You listen and it speaks. You surrender and it guides. And the more you lean into this dance, the more you see that it has always been choreographed with a wisdom beyond your imagination. Even the missteps were part of the rhythm. Even the pauses were part of the music. What you once thought was chaos was in fact a hidden harmony, waiting for you to step in tune. And with this harmony, joy arises, not as fleeting pleasure, but as a quiet radiance that does not depend on conditions. Joy in simply being alive, in tasting the air, in watching the clouds, in feeling your own existence. This joy is not loud, not dramatic. It is subtle, steady, like a flame that cannot be extinguished by the winds of circumstance. It is the joy of knowing that you are part of something vast, mysterious, and beautiful, and that your very presence in it is enough. And as this quiet flame of joy steadies within you, life's pace no longer feels like a race against time. You notice that there is no rush, no finish line you must desperately reach before it is too late. Time itself seems to soften, because you are no longer measuring your worth against the ticking of the clock. The obsession with being ahead dissolves, for you recognize that there is no such thing as ahead or behind. There is only unfolding, and unfolding cannot be hurried. Just as you cannot force a flower to bloom by pulling at its petals, you cannot force your own becoming. You allow it, you nurture it, and in its own season it blossoms. This shift brings peace into areas of your life where there was once only pressure. You begin to let go of the constant striving to prove yourself, to keep up, to measure against standards that were never truly yours. You find that success is not a fixed destination, but the depth of presence you bring to whatever you are doing. Washing dishes can be as sacred as writing a book, if it is done with awareness. Speaking to a stranger can be as meaningful as giving a speech, if it is done with presence. In this way, the so-called ordinary moments become extraordinary because you are awake to them. With this awakening, your energy shifts. What you once wasted on resistance, you now channel into creation. What you once spent on fear, you now pour into love. And as your energy shifts, so does the world around you. People respond differently. Opportunities arise where there were none. Synchronicities weave themselves into your days. It is not that the world suddenly changes in your favor. It is that your inner state draws forth a reflection that matches it. The universe mirrors your energy, and as your energy becomes lighter, freer, more open, the mirror reflects that same lightness back to you. And then you see, perhaps for the first time, that you were never separate from this universe at all. The stars that shine above you, the rivers that carve their paths, the wind that moves across the earth, these are not outside forces acting upon you. They are expressions of the same life that animates you. The breath moving through your lungs is the same breath that stirs the trees. The pulse within your chest is the same pulse that moves the ocean. You are not a fragment lost in a vast universe. You are the universe experiencing itself as you. And in that recognition, loneliness dissolves because you see that you have always belonged. This belonging does not mean that life will always feel easy, but it does mean that you never again feel out of place. Even in difficulty, you know you are where you need to be. Even in uncertainty, you sense the deeper intelligence carrying you. This sense of belonging allows you to rest, even in the midst of change. You no longer cling to certainty because you trust the ground beneath you, even if it shifts. You no longer fear the unknown because you recognize it as the source of all possibility. And so you meet the unknown not with dread, but with curiosity. Curiosity opens doors where fear would have closed them. With curiosity, you begin to ask different questions, not how can I control this, but what can I learn from this, not why is this happening to me, but what is this inviting me to see. And in asking new questions, you discover new answers, answers that were always available but hidden behind the veil of resistance. Life becomes less about certainty and more about discovery. Each day becomes an exploration, each moment an invitation, each experience a teacher. And the more you learn to live this way, the more courage naturally arises. Not the rigid courage of bracing against life, but the fluid courage of flowing with it. The courage to let go when it is time, the courage to step forward when the heart calls, the courage to remain still when nothing needs to be forced. This courage is not about fearlessness. It is about intimacy with fear. You feel it, acknowledge it, and yet you do not bow to it. Fear becomes simply another wave in the great ocean of your being, rising, falling, passing, while you remain the vastness that holds it all. And in this vastness, you finally see that you do not need to become more in order to be worthy. Worth was never something to earn. It was something you carried all along. The moment you were born, you were already enough. Every heartbeat since has been enough. The striving, the proving, the grasping. All of it was born of forgetting this simple truth. But as you remember it now, a deep relief fills you. You are allowed to exist without justification. You are allowed to rest in your own being. You are allowed to be simply because you are. And so, if there is one truth to carry with you from this moment, it is this. You are not waiting for life to begin. You are not behind. You are not lost. You are not broken. You are in the exact place you need to be for everything to turn. The shift does not happen tomorrow, nor when circumstances bend to your will. It happens now, when you decide to see differently, to release what no longer serves you, to trust the current rather than fight it. This is the moment where the tide changes, not because the universe suddenly grants you a new destiny, but because you awaken to the one that has been unfolding all along. Do not underestimate the quiet power of this realization. Empires rise and fall, stars are born and collapse, rivers carve canyons over millennia, but in the stillness of this breath, the whole of existence lives within you. You are part of that eternal flow, and the instant you recognize it, everything shifts. What once seemed impossible becomes inevitable. What once felt heavy becomes light. What once seemed like chaos becomes clarity. So let this be the moment you stop postponing your becoming. Let this be the moment you put down the burdens of regret and the anxieties of tomorrow. Let this be the moment you step fully into the present, into your own life, into the truth that you are already enough. And from this place, watch how the world responds. Watch how doors open, how peace deepens, how joy rises, not because life has turned around, but because you have. This is the moment everything in your life turns around. And the wonder is, it was always here, waiting for you to see it.